Welcome back to Teaching the Unteachables, where we dive into teaching and learning methodologies for professionals like you. As instructors, we have the responsibility to teach our students how to take care of themselves. Learn more about personal safety at OSHA.com. All right, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining Did You Know, the ESCO HVAC podcast. So we're hanging out with J.R. Koch. J.R., how are you doing, my friend?
I am doing good. How are you?
I'm doing extremely well, and I know we're starting the school season back up, and I know you're as busy as can be, so I really appreciate your time today.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the things that we've talked about before, and we wanted to dive into is safety, and I would almost say the lack of safety training in many of our programs. Would you say that's relatively consistent in the industry?
This is true.
And a lot of it is because we don't have the formal training, or we don't have the curriculum for doing classes like, say, OSHA 10 and OSHA 30 in the classrooms. So let's dive a little bit into safety in the classrooms and tell us a little bit about your background, especially in safety.
Well, I've been doing, out of high school, I went into a 2-year technical program for HVAC. And I didn't think about safety probably for the first 3 years or so that I was
Until you hurt something.
Until I hurt myself, exactly. And I got a finger here that doesn't straighten out.
Oh, okay. So that was the thing that started it.
Yeah, a little bit of a sawzall incident.
Mine was a wire wheel strand in the eyeball.
Yep.
So people get on me all the time now because I'm like Mr. Safety, and I'm like, it's for a reason, a very good reason. When you impale something onto your body, you think twice about it the next time. And so
funny how pain does some of that to you, doesn't it?
I always say some of the best lessons are the ones we learn.
Exactly. So I'm fairly young. I'm just out of high school. I go to 2-year tech school. I worked 3 years in the industry and like residential, and then I get hurt. The fact that I had gone to tech school, the next job I went to, I was able to walk into a place and they said, "Hey, what about supervising some installations?" I'd done that at the residential level.
Sure.
And so I started supervising on commercial sites, just managing the job site. Yeah. And once it became someone, other people I was in charge of other people.
You were liable for other people's safety.
Exactly. Yeah. So I won't say that the first few years that it was, that I even knew where they ask questions at,
Right, exactly.
It was something that, we started to have, we have toolbox talks, weekly talks and stuff. And so I learned over time. Of course, I'm working a lot of union jobs, and I got the possibility of people showing up and people giving you bad advice, like go out the back door if OSHA shows up. That doesn't work out really well.
Right.
And so it's much better to just do something.
Be prepared.
Right. What really got me involved is after I'd done the commercial installs, I got to working at a college in facilities around when Virginia Tech happened. And we started doing, active shooter training and other types of, it just built our safety program up. And then I've run into situations over the years where we needed some leadership in that area. And I've always sat on safety committees since that day, since those times. So.
Okay. So like from your experience, if we're looking at our program and we're looking at the safety topics that our students should be exposed to, where would you start? I mean, what are the fundamentals that we need to embrace?
Well, we talked to you mentioned curriculum. Do we know where to find curriculum?
Yeah, exactly. Where do you go for it?
We can hit that as a separate topic, but there's this thing called Focus 4 that OSHA has. And the Focus 4 is, you can go right to OSHA's website and type in Focus 4 into their search engine, and it'll come up with Focus 4. And that is one area where they've already written a bunch of curriculum for you.
Okay, excellent.
There is actual tests and everything that are on there if you type in Focus 4. And the Focus 4 are the areas where OSHA has identified the most incidents have taken place out in the industry. And those would be falls, electrocution,
Sure.
caught in and caught between. So trapped, in something
Entrapment
like
scenarios.
wrenching could fall into caught in.
Yeah.
The caught between you be like getting crushed between a piece of machinery or something. A forklift safety could fall into those areas. So those are definitely no brainers. You start with those, and then we spent time out in the field, and we kind of learned that there's some other areas that maybe we were lacking in ourselves, and I've built upon that. I've of course touched on PPE in class.
Yeah, exactly.
Material handling.
Yep. Oh, I got my sheet metal scars. Stitches even.
Definitely lockout, tag out, which would fall into like an electrical area. HAZCOM, SDS sheets.
Yep.
Confined space. Okay, here's one that we often, as HVAC people, is being in a cooling tower, a confined space.
Oh, man. All right.
Definitely attics and crawl spaces. So, and then one that I like to throw in there is rigging. I spend some time with my students learning how to rig. I know as a commercial installer, first time helicopters flew over my head, and I've done that. It's not like we did that all the time, but I've done that. And they walk you through it when you hire someone to do that for you. But, still a very intimidating situation, especially if you've never, learned how to do any kind of rigging before. So we spent some time doing rigging in class.
So when we think about like our students and preparing our students for training, what are some of the dangers that are faced by students when we start getting into, safety education?
Well, there's definitely barriers to doing things that are safe. Like to think about the students. Some of the barriers are within ourselves. I mean, I've gotten hurt, and even teaching safety, I continue to get hurt sometimes. Because, many of us are. I'm a bull in a china shop, and I mean that in that I have to get if there's a task that's at hand. I have to power through and get that task in hand. I guess I'm not saying that I'm bull in a china shop as far as clumsy or something like that, but I've got to get a task done, and sometimes
we're task oriented very often. Yeah,
very often, and that can get you in a lot of trouble. I mean, if you're not willing to wait for the proper material lift to lift something, in fact, instead you're like, oh, I'm still strong. I'll put that up there in that up in that attic or whatever. You can get yourself hurt that way. So we create some of our own. Of course, there's also employers pushing for the time, getting things done in a certain amount of time.
Sure.
Anyway. And there's ignorance, just not knowing what question to ask. And then I'd say the other thing is complacency. Once you know how to do something safely, will you continue to do that, or will you get comfortable enough where you're not paying attention? I see so many motorcycle riders out there right now, and I ride a motorcycle, and I think everyone's safe riding that motorcycle as they first get out on the road, and then then it starts becoming like driving a car once they've figured out all the controls, and then over time maybe they don't think about things the way they should, and it's the same way in the work on a job site for a lot of our students. So teaching them to identify those things is something that we need to do.
And out of that, many of those have become regulations that we are required to follow.
Well, yeah, that's where OSHA comes into place. I mean, regulation comes from the things that
that can hurt and kill us.
Right. So we get into talking about OSHA and how OSHA came about. And OSHA came about in the 1970. The OSHA was passed, and the OSHA set up what we see as OSHA now. Regulations have built from that. There's 4 main group classifications that we can train in. There's general industry, which you could think of as like a facility setting or an office setting. There's construction, and the construction is slightly different than general industry because everything's set up in a temporary setting. I mean, some of the, guardrails and things like that, they
exactly.
be slightly different just because it's in a temporary setting, or how you're going to assemble that structure could be. And then there's maritime. You can get authorized to train in maritime. And then our agriculture is its own little area of classifications. So.
Now, it can be a little bit different between states and regions in accordance to federal regulations. Is that right?
This is true. We have, I think it's 10 regions federally, but many states before 1970 had regulations, safety regulations, safety offices. And so when the OSHA came into place and we started having federal jurisdiction, they allowed states to keep their own.
Choose.
Keep their own.
If they were more stringent, or was it a
OSHA code is going to be like any code, like the International Fuel Gas Code, or those codes. It's going to be the minimum.
Exactly.
So if you're a state entity and you're working on your own, not only are you going to have a federal office probably in your state or in your region, and you're going to be part of a federal region, like Washington next door to us in Idaho, they have their own OSHA offices, but they also have federal offices.
Okay.
So they do their own thing, but it's got to be more stringent than what OSHA. OSHA is going to be the minimum.
Sure. So OSHA is the fundamental, and we see that in our own, HVAC regulations. You can have certain requirements at a state level, but you may have a city or a county that has more stringent requirements. You still have to meet all the basics of the state, but you dive a little bit deeper. So it's kind of the same way with OSHA from the federal perspective. You still have to meet this everywhere, but you may be required to dive deeper into your own region or your own state. So it's very important to know what those requirements are in your area, especially if you're moving from one region or one state to another.
Exactly.
Awesome. All right. So let's talk about the classes, right? So where and how could one get authorized by OSHA to provide OSHA 10 and OSHA 30 training and the cards that go along with them?
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what I did. And I had a background in safety because I was on safety committees. So I went to my regional
office,
OSHA office, and that's in Washington. And they have a training facility there, Pacific Northwest OSHA. Yeah, I'm looking up at my card right now. Pacific Northwest OSHA Education Center, out of University of Washington.
Gotcha. That's the regional.
Yeah, and so in the Pacific Northwest, if you're listening and you're in Idaho, Washington, Oregon, or Alaska, there you go. And actually, you might have. There's a few more of them, but that was the closest one to me. And first off, they're gonna ask you to document over your experience in safety, and so I don't know what the threshold level is there, but I was able to document enough experience with my safety committees that I'd been on and so forth to say, hey, this is a certain percentage of my job. I had to present it to them as a certain percentage of my career job.
Okay, makes sense.
And once that's approved, then you get to go in and take a train-the-trainer course. I think it's OSHA 500. And 510 is the occupational safety and standards one that kind of goes through the standards book. And you got to have a standards book. That's the primary source, right?
Right.
This is the code that you got to at least know how to look something up in there.
Right. At least be able how to find it.
Yes. So you take a train-to-trainer course and you take that, and then you're authorized, and that's the terminology that they use. My card says I'm authorized to provide training in construction. You have to pick one of those four that we mentioned earlier.
Oh, okay. So it's not a blanket coverage for all the different sectors.
Exactly. I was just on a trip and I ran into someone from another state. It was, oh, you're an OSHA trainer. And I said, yeah, where do you live? And, oh, that's too far away to help them out. But
sure,
they're always looking for somebody that's in that specific area.
Right.
To train. So,
okay.
So so you get authorized to train in a certain area. You've got a certain set of curriculum. If for a 10-hour or 30-hour card, there is going to be a certain amount of curriculum that you have to teach according to OSHA standards. And then you get some leeway in some other areas. So I can kind of tailor the rest of the content for my
a little bit more specific to the application.
Right. And there's nothing there that says that if we're talking about rigging, I can't focus on rigging for HVAC.
Yeah, exactly.
So and so forth. So.
And what about testing then? Do you become like a proctor for testing?
No, I hold all my own tests. I can write my own tests.
Okay.
So there's no standard OSHA test that I have to include. I have to teach the content.
Right.
And I do have to prove their knowledge.
Competency.
The big one is that and this is the hardest for me as an instructor if I do a 30-hour card, that's almost 2 weeks of content. Class.
Yeah, exactly. That's a lot to fit into
I
a
can break it
curriculum.
up. Yes, definitely. Will the students show up every day?
Right.
Because OSHA makes you maintain a log
of your time.
Who's there.
Okay.
And they have to sign it. And if they're not there that day, one day out of that 2 weeks, then
they don't qualify for their card.
Exactly.
Okay.
To be there every day.
So after meeting the requirements of say we're doing an OSHA 10 and we've met our 10 hours of physical classroom time, what's the procedure for acquiring your card then?
At that point, I submit in a report to the University of Washington in my case, University of Washington in my case. I submit in a report that says that these people completed it. And I pay a fee. I think it just went up to like $10 a card for me.
Okay.
So it's not super expensive.
Right.
So even within my, just pay for it out of my budget.
Exactly.
But you can have your students pay for it, I suppose. And then it's pretty quick. I usually get the cards back in about a week or so. And then I have to take a picture of the front and the back of each card and keep that for my records. And I can hand them out to everybody. And they come
Fantastic.
So
I know it's a lot to add, particularly if we're doing like that. You said the 30-hour, that's a lot of physical class time, but now we're talking about, introducing safety into our curriculum as well. And I'm sure any school administration is going to look at that and go, well, yeah, that's definitely an important curriculum to have within our portfolio. But what if it's something that we're looking for? What if our advisory board is asking for our students to acquire their OSHA 10 or their OSHA 30 before going into the field, but we're not going to be equipped, or maybe we don't have the additional hours to introduce that curriculum into our program? What are other ways that the students can get their 10 and 30-hour training?
I try not to name drop, but it's just something that I'm working with right now. And I'm working with the Interplay publishers, and other publishers have the same deal. But a lot of them have agreements to provide OSHA training.
Virtual online style training.
Yeah. So you could have it as part of that, those readings or whatever.
As a requirement for home training or as home assignments. Nothing like the hands-on, though. I mean, we all know that.
Well, we should be doing hands-on when we're in the lab, no matter what our curriculum is, right?
Exactly.
So, I mean, they're going to have their safety glasses on, and maybe I have mine update SDS. Even if I wasn't doing OSHA cards, they'd be update. They know what an SDS sheet is and stuff.
Exactly.
Outside of that, I mean, we all have experience in the field. Yeah. We're HVAC people.
We know what won't kill us. I can tell you that.
and I found over the time that the students really respond well when you share those experiences you've gone through.
Life lessons are top curriculum content.
So no, you don't need to hand out cards to teach safety in the classroom. I mean, it's nice.
Yeah.
But you don't have to do that to teach safety in the classroom.
Fantastic. Well, JR, I really appreciate your time, and we hope that anyone that is interested in adding OSHA 10 and OSHA 30 safety to their programs now have a little bit better direction. And we sure appreciate your time today.
Absolutely.